All right, today we're talking about going online. It's been a couple of weeks, and we've been doing this and getting our students out of the classroom and online. I think it's a good time to just take a minute to see how it's going. I'm Dan Limmer from Limmer Education, here for this live video. Please stop by, leave comments. I'd love to hear from you as we talk about this. If I were just to put an alternate title on this Facebook Live presentation, I think I'd call it "The Honeymoon is Over." My personal experience is that it's really great to be able to respond to an emergency. I mean, we're EMS people after all, and you say to me, "Hey, we've got to get a couple classes online," which I had the good fortune to do for Galveston College, where I teach in Texas, and we jump in, we solve the problem, and we do it. Now, in the third week, I find that as an educator, I've gone from the emergency, solve the problem, to kind of a long haul look at things. The amount of work that's actually goes into an online class can sometimes get by people. If you're at a university, tenured faculty often choose not to do online classes because they tend to be more work. When you have to go to a traditional classroom, you go into the classroom, you teach people, you can answer questions, you give your tests there, you correct your tests, you go back, you meet students before and after. Not so bad. However, in the online classroom, in the online space, in distance education, asynchronously, synchronously, or otherwise, we find that we have the ability to do video and talk to students, but we find that we often have to teach the class several times or answer questions repeatedly. It seems that in the online space, the amount of work that's required is a lot, checking into discussion boards every day and just all those things. Yeah, they're a lot. That's the spot that I'm in. So I guess the honeymoon is over. However, it's a good experience. And I will say, with this personal distancing and people with stay-at-home orders, I do enjoy having all those students' faces on my GoToMeeting screen to be able to see them. I think that it's really nice. For the students, they've gone from a totally new thing. They probably were largely on campus, and now they're online. That's a very big transition. I think it's probably likely that there was some denial, anger, bargaining, depression. I'm not sure we're at acceptance yet. So I think that the educators and the students have two different things. People are starting to fill in. I'm grateful that you stopped by. I'd love to hear your experiences, with this as it goes. Now, if I could turn the clock back and do one thing to get ready for this eventuality and something that I want to do going forward, I would somehow get my students equipment to have at home. So here's the idea. I don't claim that this is new. I don't claim that that's original. But what I want to do is I want to create, and by the way, business opportunity here for someone. If you're an equipment manufacturer, listen to this because I think that this is going to be important. I don't think that this is going to suddenly go away and that we're going to be back in the classroom whistling a happy tune all the time now. We're going to have on and off needs for students to be able to respond. Hi, Sonia. Here's what I want. I want my students to come in to class and have someone ship to them. Right? When I say into class, I mean online. But I want them to have a couple rolls of 3-inch gauze. I want them to have 3 triangular bandages. I want them to have a pen light. I want them to have a stethoscope. I want them to have a blood pressure cuff. I want them to have a SAM splint, right? Some gauze pads. You say, what would I do if I had those things? What would that be? If I had those simple things, which I don't think are going to be all that much more than $50 to $75 if we were to be able to buy in bulk, get these shipped directly to my students, I could do medical assessment, trauma assessment, bleeding control, and splinting for my EMT students and watch them online demonstrate what's going on. Think about that. I mean, that's not difficult stuff to do. Right now, there's programs that are trying to get this stuff out to their students. At what point are we not just going to say, you come into class, you get your book, you get your learning management system codes, you get your apps, but you also get a certain amount of equipment, right? And we always throw a pocket face mask in there. And, money we're spending on uniforms, which we still may need if we're in the classroom, let's add this equipment on. And I think that we would be able to do a lot more stuff online. Right now, almost every agency, accrediting body, state has gone out and said, okay, we know you're going to have to do things a little bit differently. You're going to have to assess people differently. You're going to have to assure competency differently. And there are ways that we can certify people or provisionally certify people without doing all the skills. But I want as much as I can for my students at home. And please throw comments in, for things that you're doing. I think the EMT class of the future, certainly of the immediate future, is going to be one that has students with equipment at home. And I don't care if they're doing it on a brother or sister or a parent, whatever it happens to be, but the ability to evaluate someone's skills through the video setting reduces the amount of time that you need online, in the lab session when it can be done online. Now, it's a little bit more work to do it that way, but I think that that's important. So what are some other observations just as we've gotten into this now? It's my third week of online classes. Like I said, I'm doing an EMT class and an AEMT class for Galveston College in Texas. And it was pretty much, boom, college is closed. Let's get these classes online. It's been quite a change. And I think one of the other things that I've seen is I think it's harder to see when students are struggling. As an educator, it takes a little bit more time to read between the lines and figure out when your students are struggling. And sometimes online, when you're relying on quizzes and other things, sometimes you find out late. And I think we have to figure out how to do that, how to be able to keep in touch, how to let students know when they could just come into your office a little before, a little bit after class, and talk to you in person, meaningfully, that now we're going to have to send a message. I give my students my mobile number. I say, text me, call me. It's just the way it's got to be now. Today, the class took a FISDAP exam, my EMT class. So to proctor this, everyone had to have a camera on them and go through and do this to keep exam security as certainly as reasonably as we can. I think that it did go well, and we did do that security. I was actually watching my students think, just like I would in a class, right? There were 15 pictures on my screen, and everyone they're going through, some people's lips were moving, some people were looking around, you watch how they were thinking, some people were going through really quickly and doing things. And it sometimes amazes me how much that can actually be like giving your unit exams when you're in class. I think that's actually turned out to be a pretty awesome experience. But still, I came into this class having never met these students. Had I started the class, then switched online, it would be different. But I kind of came in, an instructor left, I came in and don't know their stories, despite the introductions. I took notes on everyone, right? I mean, think about how much more difficult it is to connect with people when you're teaching with them and it's online. I'm not saying it's impossible, and I think sometimes we can get very deep connections. But when you're there all the time and you can have more personal interactions on breaks, when you're there and you're seeing them and you're seeing their how they're dressed and other details, it's difficult. So whenever they introduce themselves, I have a book for each class. I wrote their name, what they like to be called, some of their story. And then I use that same book to write observations. Hey, I emailed them about this, or I did this, so I can kind of keep a record. When your office isn't your office, that certainly poses some challenges as well. Lots of people are here now. It's really great to see you. Please, if you have any comments or thoughts of what I'm saying, send them along. I certainly am not here because I have the exclusive thoughts. I think sharing what you know is really important, and I would be very happy to do that. The other thing I've seen is students are more anxious. Students are more anxious. I can put them in a video where I'm going to teach. I've got it set. So I've got a computer screen with all their smiling faces on it in front of me, and I have a screen over on the other side I can put references on, and a third screen is my iPad. Using a Mac, using Sidecar, I can make my iPad a third screen. So in GoToMeeting, I pick screen 3, and I've got a whiteboard on my iPad, and I can draw, much like I would be drawing on a dry erase board in class. So I think I can get the information through to the students. They read their book, hopefully. They listen to audios that we've provided. They answer discussion board questions that I've strategically chosen to bring out certain points. And then we meet after that work is done to review the whole week and kind of wrap it up in a package so you understand. I'm not as concerned about the students' didactic knowledge and what's going on as I am their subjective feelings about what they're learning now compared to what they learned before. And while I wasn't in the class with them before, I have no indication there's any problems with the class. I think that the online education, like I just described, can be as dynamic or better for learning than just sitting in the classroom. I think that there's a lot of potential, and as I've predicted before and said in all of these live, Facebook Live things, that I think we're going to do more of this as time goes on. Sometimes necessity, sometimes because we can, because we want to reach a larger audience. We want to make our schedules better, but we're hesitant to do it. What's the best way to make that happen? Throw us into an emergency, and what will we do? We will respond appropriately. Students are anxious about their practicals. I think that not having the lab sessions intermingled with the classroom sessions doesn't always lead to great integration. It doesn't lead to connection. And the other thing is people get very nervous not only about skills, but about how they're going to apply those skills not only in the field, but sometimes even more so for the National Registry practical exam that they may have to take or will have to take at some point. And then how that integrates the material into class. If you teach a class on cardiology and resuscitation, then you're going to the lab and you practice with the defibrillators and you have some chest pain scenarios. It brings the classroom and the lab material together, and I think we miss that to a certain extent. So the other thing, I think students are a little anxious, and I think that that's normal, and we try and reduce that feeling of anxiety. But I think that we have to expect it and do our best for that to happen. I told my students again, the concept of you starting this class in January and then going until May and taking the National Registry exam and becoming an EMT or an AEMT might not be the reality anymore. It just might not be. We can take some things and put them aside. That and still get you certified or a provisional certification. Every state has a little bit of a different rule with that, but we still have to do some things with the risk of putting students out in clinicals, if we could even have clinicals, because of COVID-19. The scarcity of personal protective equipment. So even departments that would have students don't have students because they can't spare the personal protective equipment that's there. And students acutely feel this too. They are motivated, our intrinsic students want to get through this and are being held back from doing that. And that's a challenge. Hello, Ted. Boy, we got lots of people here from all over the world, no less. Welcome to you all. And I can obviously talk for a long time, but like I said, put your comments in here. My students also, I find, have a lot of questions about life in general and EMS during a pandemic. Questions from students have talked about, well, why would I wear a face mask, the cloth face mask that people are talking about now? Does that protect me from disease? What does that do? I find that we're also sometimes ambassadors for public health in the CDC as we teach our students, because they're processing this not only in the concept of, all right, I want to go out into clinical someday, I want to go out and be an EMT someday, and I've got to think about this virus and how it might affect me, but I also have to think about what happens when I leave my house and go to the store, or what do I do when I go and visit my grandmother? And educators are being asked these questions. So I really think that our responsibility in times like this are not only educational. I really think that there's a calming influence we can have, a little public health role that we can have, and we're educating our students about what's going on and what's best practices, what are really good decisions in the era of a pandemic. I don't think there's a lot of EMS programs that are saying, well, we're probably not going to have a need for us to do more students. Every department, I think, is saying to themselves, if I have an excess of people, or if I have people that get sick, I'm going to need fresh blood. I'm going to need new people. I'm going to need new providers. So everyone that's in the role of educators in EMS has got to think not only about how you're going to get people through the course. I think we're also thinking about how we're going to preserve the pipeline, how we're going to keep our EMT students in, get them in the door, get them to be AEMTs or get them to be paramedics, so we can continue to feed our customers, which are often the local departments that depend on us to train. And you see how all these things kind of interact. We're struggling to get students through clinicals and laboratory experiences in less than ideal situations. And we're finding students that did okay in the classroom, but they just don't have the drive and the focus to thrive online. And we're wondering what our future classes are going to look like, all while being called by local departments saying, I need to get some of my people in training. Are you going to graduate any people? I need some people here in my department because things are changing rapidly. All these things are very much on our mind here. So Ted Rogers from St. Pete's College in Florida said that the campus donated PPE to local health facilities. I know that Galveston College, where I'm from in Texas, even though I'm doing a lot of my teaching from cold, currently rainy Maine spring, also donated a lot of the personal protective equipment from the campus to responders out there. I think that EMS is actually responding, EMS education is responding in a lot of different and positive ways, and has a very challenging but essential function. It may not seem like the educators are getting a lot of the attention right now, but we will be, to keep that pipeline going, to be a stable force, to be out there doing good things for our students and our communities by keeping these things going and meeting the challenge. I guess that brings me to the last point in this, is that I think that as we go through, I think there's uncertainty about the future. I think that there are transfer services that aren't doing their nursing home calls, their assisted living calls anymore, and we have EMTs on one hand being laid off in that. But we also have classes to keep going and things to do. Even us leaving home and going into classrooms, some places are bringing in students in groups of 4 and keeping them distance to be able to do labs. As we do this, how this affects ourselves and our jobs in the pandemic. There's so much uncertainty about all these things, especially the educational formats as we go through. Whether we're talking about our personal lives or our lives as EMS educators, the uncertainty is difficult. If your state has you staying at home till the end of April or the first week of May, and summer classes are going to be starting, we have uncertainty about that. But even ourselves, our personal uncertainty about everything from supermarket shelves to the safety and health of ourselves and our relatives adds to a very difficult job. A lot of people just came in. We're talking about, now I'm in my 3rd week of doing distance education in an EMT and an AEMT class. And just to go over the topics that I talked about, hopefully they'll come back and even though this is Facebook Live, we'll watch it recorded, that the honeymoon is over, that I'm now 3 weeks into the class and I'm realizing how much work it is, how much fun it was to get going in the exciting stage, but both I and the students are hitting kind of a part of reality. I wish my students had more equipment at home. If they had basic equipment, I could watch them perform skills on family members and be able to validate some things that would reduce my need for lab time and be able to give me greater confidence when we send them out, possibly with reduced expectations in laboratory and clinical and field experiences. I think it's difficult to see how students are struggling. There's something about being in person that's a little bit different. Even the casual interactions in the hall, the ability to bring those things up. I do miss that. Yet I am a believer in this type of education, and I do believe we're doing it more, if not by necessity, by choice. Our students have anxiety about the National Registry, about skills performance. They have anxiety about being in a pandemic. And we have uncertainty, certainly, in the jobs that we do here. So, yeah, it looks like several people, some Maine people here as well, Eric and Sonia. A lot of people donated their PPE, and I think that is it's just awesome. It shows the heart we have and the connection to our people. I really think that's great. All right, I miss my kids. Yeah, I miss them. And Benji, those interactions I think are why we're educators. Listen, the the challenges don't go away. People that aren't doing well on exams, the counseling, all those things that we do are still there. But we're sometimes doing them one-on-one online. What about doing remediation? If you had 5 students that failed an exam, you say, well, come in an hour early and you do them all at once. But many times we find ourselves having to create new material to do remediation remotely or asynchronously. And the work is really quite a bit different. Ted, again from Florida, also in week 3. I mean, pretty much everybody had a spring break around the same time, and that's really when the rug was pulled out from under us, I think. So whether you're in, week 1 or 2 or 3, getting back, there are certain stages that you go through. And Ted says so far the feedback's been positive. I think that I would agree. With that, I kind of fell into a position in Texas. I'm doing remotely here from Maine until we can get back down there safely. But the learning curve is challenging. I very much agree with that. But if we do it with passion, and we do it with conscience, and we embrace technology and the human side of things with our students, ultimately, I think, even looking at the hierarchy of needs, they really need to know that they're being taken care of and that you care and that you'll be there for them, even if you aren't literally in the same room. Well, I'm accused quite a bit of talking too much. Let me just go through and do one more thing. Skills labs. Bobby says that skills labs gives you validation, and there's a cascade of getting classwork. I hate to call it lecture now because we're all doing some sort of dynamic activities in classroom, but when you go into lab and when you go into clinical and you're out there, it kind of wraps everything together. I think we might be missing that wrapping, and I think that might be a good place to stop. I had some really great comments in here, and I was just sharing my week number 3. The honeymoon's over, but we go on. We go on, like I said, passionately. With the way we would do our regular classes, we try and connect and try and do really great things for our students. I don't know what's going to happen in week 4 or 5, but I'll come back and tell you about it. As long as you keep coming back, I will tell you more about it. If you came in late, we will put this on video. And on April 30th, we're doing our biannual free NREMT study session. So please send your students along to that. I'm going to be doing an hour-long general study session to help prepare students for the National Registry, even though they might be a little unsure when they're going to take that with all the things that are there. Have them stop by a free session, and you don't have to always study at the last minute. So come by April 30th. We're doing that in the evening, and we'll get some information out to you about that. Please pass it along to your students. Thank you all for coming by, and I'll be seeing you on week 4 or 5.